Welcome back to our now weekly podcast here at Veil of Sound. And this time we give you the third installment of our Converge series, where we don't talk about Converge a lot, but where we talk with the members of the band about certain other things. And this time I'm very pleased to have Nate on the show, who plays bass in Converge. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in Doomriders you play the guitar, right?
Yes.
See, a man of many facets.
Or some strings.
Whatever. Okay, so how about the harp next?
I don't know if I have anywhere to put a harp.
Okay. Do you also play something like lap steel or something like that?
No, but I would love to learn that.
Well,
That's
ask.
it's pretty difficult.
Well, I've had a talk with Dana of Insect Arc a few months ago, and she said that it took her also quite a while to learn it, but now it's her favorite instrument.
Yeah, I mean, it looks really fun.
I can imagine. So, Nate, I would like to talk with you about ethics and hardcore. But of course, before we do that, we also have to talk a little bit about hardcore and metal music. So, what got you into hardcore and metal, first of all?
Um, Skateboarding, pretty
Okay.
much. Um, I had a little bit of an introduction to punk music because my mom liked the Ramones, and we I I always had music around the house. There was Lou Reed and Bowie records and stuff like that. So it wasn't too out there to like punk music. But yeah, skateboarding was initially what led me to punk music. Reading Thrasher magazine and stuff like that back in the 80s.
So, was it also more like the skate punk thing, like suicidal tendencies or, all of that LA punk stuff?
Yeah, there was a lot of the LA punk stuff. The first punk record I ever owned was Thrasher Skate Rock Volume 1.
Okay.
And that was primarily skate bands, the Big Boys and the Faction and JFA and that sort of stuff. But right around that same time, if you read Thrasher magazine back then, if you just opened up there was Notes from the Underground, there was Pus Zone, so they were always covering music,
Yeah.
pretty in depth, and so you had that stuff that was always turning me on to what was happening. And then if you went to the back of the mag, there was mail order stuff where like half of the page was skate stuff and the other half of the page was like band t-shirts and stuff like that. So you start going through all that and you see the Misfits skull and you're like, oh, that's cool, I need to know what that's about. And like the DRI guy and like all that stuff. So that was initially what led me to it.
Yeah, the appeal of some of the band's mascots is amazing, right? The Crimson Ghost, or also Eddie of Iron Maiden. That's always fun to see. But has there been any particular record which maybe turned you into like more of a metal? I don't want to say metalhead, but more into a metal direction.
I was never a huge metal guy. I always liked the more crossover stuff. Like I love DRI, but early DRI was my favorite. Like Dealing with It, the Dirty Rotten LP, COC, The Accused, like that kind of stuff. My friends back then were like into Metallica and Slayer and all that stuff, and I liked it, but it just wasn't my thing. I think the first metal well, do Danzig records count as metal records?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
For the sake of it, let's say they count.
Okay. I mean, the metal stuff that I liked had direct connection to punk and hardcore.
Mm-hmm.
The first metal record, like the first metal band that I got really into, was probably Sepultura.
Oh.
But again, direct connection to punk. You know, like the Cavalleras are both total punk rockers, and they love Discharge, and you could hear that.
They're crust punks, right? So,
yeah. So there was that, and then Entombed. But again, you can hear the Discharge influence.
Yeah, that's true.
So
that's interesting. So, like, then I have to ask the question, because, like, very often some bands are connected with crust punk even though they aren't. But Neurosis, the first like 2-3 albums are much crustier than the last 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Would you also rather then prefer something like Word by Law than over Souls of Zero?
No, I mean, I liked Word is Law when it came out, and I loved Souls at Zero, but what drew me to Neurosis, just aside from them being heavy and, wild, was their dedication to progressing and evolution musically. So in the case of that band, I've always just wanted to see what they come up with next, and that I think they set that precedent very early on.
Yeah. I mean, I would still say that there are a few bands where I say I buy everything, but Neurosis is one of them. Whatever comes. Doesn't matter. I always buy it instantly.
I want to know what it's going to be.
Yeah, exactly. Because you never know where they're going to go with their next record. And even though if they go in a different direction, it's still Neurosis. And I think that's also true for several of your bands. I mean, like, wherever they go, you can still very clearly hear, okay, this is Doomriders, this is Converge. Even though a lot of people think, like with Blood Moon and stuff, there has been a lot of, I don't want to say controversy because that's stupid, but like discussion if that is still Converge. And I always say, like, if you don't understand that record, then you haven't understand the band themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That is a good thing. We'll come to that question a little later.
Neurosis was a band that sort of showed me how to do things, I guess. Even before I knew them, like, they were always sort of the gold standard of how to operate. And so the fact that they were so willing to just shed whatever people had put on them and just forge their own path was always what I most respected about them and what I aspired to.
Then let's get straight to that question. I mean, like, with a lot of bands, there's always the question of loyalty and integrity. Like, how loyal do they have to be to their fans, and how much integrity do they owe to themselves? Do you understand fans of your music who complain about ideas you don't share, or like directions they expect you to go? Or do you just say, we do our thing for ourselves, first of all?
I mean, ultimately, my number one rule has always been make the record you want to listen to. And that's it. If people want to like it, that's cool. If they don't like it, that's okay too. I feel that it's there's a weird balance there for sure, because we're really lucky to have such loyal fans. But just like with Neurosis, I think it's really important that you set a precedent right away. This is what we do. This is, you're never going to know exactly what to expect from us. And I think if you do that, you find yourself pretty quickly getting away from those discussions where it's like, you're not giving the fans what they want. And like, but what we do is specifically challenge our fans. So, you know, if you're a fan of our band, then that should, I hope that's the thing that's you know, that's being taken away. But if it's not, that's cool too. I mean, people have different reasons for liking the things they like, so I can't fault anyone for that.
Um, yeah, I think the same way too. I mean, like there are bands that challenge you with every record they do, and that is a very good thing. And I think also those are the lasting bands. But I've also had like bands which I really, really, really enjoyed, and then all of a sudden they do something where I just simply sit for the life of me could not go along with. You know, one of my favorite bands was Stretch back in the day, and then all of a sudden they did something with Dan the Automator, and it turns out like dance pop shit, and it's like, okay, no, I'm out of there.
I'm not familiar with that band.
It's like an experimental rock or metal band from like the late '90s, early zeros, from Los Gatos, California,
Cool.
and that it's just like, you know, the thing is, before that they were really experimental, and all of a sudden they do something that just doesn't fit to my mind frame. Like, let's say all of a sudden you would do a hip hop album with Converge.
Yeah, that would be weird. But
Yeah.
on the same token, I feel that if whatever I set out to do, if I did it well, then I'd be proud of it. You know, that's really all it comes down to. Like, sometimes a lot of this stuff is just challenging ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Can we actually pull this off and make it work? And you know, it might not be for everyone, but that's okay. There are other records to listen to.
Yeah, especially if you have such a long-standing discography like Converge, of course. Now, I like to ask you one initial question about hardcore and ethics. Do you think that a certain kind of ethics is and morals is connected to hardcore in general, or is it a widespread field of things?
I think if you had asked me this question 20 years ago, I would have said yes. There is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there are morals attached to it. Now, I I don't think there is. I think that hardcore in general, um, you know, you have a musical genre, and then you have like a social scene surrounding it, and those things aren't necessarily uh, mutually exclusive. Um, I think that art is literally, I mean, anyone with any mindset can make art and music. And
That's true.
whether or not I like it or agree with it doesn't matter. Um, so, I mean, yes, as we've certainly seen over the past, you know, 5 to 8 years, like I think there's a very wide palette of political and moral mindsets in hardcore. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you know, what I might find idyllic doesn't matter because I'm not in control. It doesn't belong to me. You know,
That is true. Of course, you cannot control the whole scene. Of course not. But you said like 20 years ago, you would have said something different. Can you try to reconstruct what you would have said 20 years ago?
you know, I think it probably wouldn't have made any sense. I think it would have just been an idyllic early, you know, an idyllic 20-something-year-old
Mm-hmm.
trying to put my idea of what something should be on everyone else. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, ultimately, for me, hardcore always came down to just staying independent and
Mm-hmm.
not wanting anything to do with the mainstream. Um, Culture has changed drastically since then,
Yeah.
and how we consume music and art has changed drastically since then. and the way that it's distributed has changed drastically since then. So, you know, to someone like me, you know, it's a lot easier to look at music as a whole and, you know, pick out the differences between, you know, an underground band and a, you know, mainstream band, or a band trying to exist in the mainstream.
Mhm.
Whereas for younger people now who grew up with the internet and with all of this stuff already in place, it's not, it's not terribly different to them. You know, it's kind of just, yeah, that's just music.
Mm.
You know, why wouldn't
Yeah,
I listen to this and this?
yeah.
Which I think is great.
There are some very, very good things coming from that open mindset. I totally agree with that. Totally. Um, However, I also see the change in the last 10 years or so. Definitely. Um, because I don't know how it was with you, but something that always got me into hardcore was some kind of a positional, very often like leftist idea. Um, I don't want to say left wing, but rather tending to the left side of the political spectrum. Um, and I think when I look at that, I don't recognize it anymore. I think politics is very often not part of hardcore anymore. Hardcore turned into something less political, more social, which has its benefits.
Well,
Definitely has its benefits.
I mean, hardcore is old now. I mean, that's got a lot to do with it. When hardcore was in its infancy, it was all very young people, very strong ideas, you know, seeing through their little blinders about how the world should be.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certainly a place for that and a need for that kind of expression. But, you know, you hardcore people in hardcore are, you know, getting into their 60s now, you know,
Yeah. Look at
and
Milo.
yeah,
Look
I
at
mean,
Graffin from Bad Religion. Look at others.
yeah,
The
it's
Mirror.
very different than when I was young, you know, where
Definitely.
like the average age was, you know, anywhere from like 14 to maybe like 22 or something, you know,
Yeah.
like now we're getting people who are, you know, retiring from their jobs, you know, and like are,
Yeah.
you know, becoming senior citizens, which is cool. But I think with age, I'm not I am not a believer in that old, you know, axiom that the older you get, the more conservative you become. I think that's bullshit. But I do believe the older you get, the more you're just kind of like, the world does not need to know my opinion on this. Because honestly, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, you know, like, and I think that's been something that's happened in hardcore just as it's grown and as people have gotten older, they've just realized like, I don't need to hear what everybody thinks about every single little thing, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and oftentimes a lot of those issues are, you know, fashion just as much as the t-shirts and the clothes they're wearing. They're just picking the right thing to say and to champion. And you know, sometimes I'm just like, I just want to know how you feel, man. Like, not like about everything out in the world, but just how you feeling there? Are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
Sing about
Yeah.
that for a little while. You know, I mean, everyone is obviously free to sing about whatever they want. Um, but yeah, I think just as people have gotten older, they've just kind of been like, no one fucking cares if I, you know, if I think this historical dude is racist because it's obvious that this guy was racist, you
Yeah.
know, or like nobody cares if I think you should be vegan, you know, that's your choice. I
Yeah.
can tell, you know, I can try and set a good example how I think people should you know, what I think is a good way to live. But, you know, you, yeah, the older you get, the more you just realize it all just becomes white noise. And sometimes it's better to find a way to connect with people here instead of, you know, there.
Yeah. But then again, we also have to think about hardcore bands who still, I don't want to say preach, but who are still very, very outspoken about, for example, the necessity of being vegan, or the quality of a rather leftist ideology. I'm thinking about bands like Earth Crisis, you know, like very, very strong opinion bands. How do you think about those bands nowadays?
I mean,
Or
those,
also, how did you think about bands back then? Like when something came out, like Gomorrah Season Ends or Firestorm?
um, Earth Crisis never appealed to me.
Okay.
I wasn't a fan. Like
Mhm.
a lot of that era of hardcore just wasn't my thing.
Because of the music or because of the ideology?
But I guess probably the music. It just wasn't my thing. Um, you know, when that stuff was sort of coming to the forefront in hardcore, I was into Born Against and Rorschach and just noisier,
Mm-hmm.
grimier, weirder stuff. You
Mm-hmm.
know, um, yeah,
It's interesting that you mentioned Rorschach because that's one of the bands that you randomly hear about, but that I think had a huge influence on hardcore.
they
At
were
least in Europe, you don't hear about them very often.
they were a massive influence
Yeah.
on hardcore, at least in the U.S. and you know to an extent on metal in the way that like I can say that they were a huge influence on Converge and all of my bands,
Okay.
and um, you know whatever influence Converge has had, that can be directly traced to Rorschach.
Wow.
No,
I
I mean
wouldn't.
not only Rorschach, but you know, Rorschach is certainly one of the bands that was a big
Mhm. Interesting. I had never thought about that being an influence on you or on your bands. So your bands, you know, when you work together with people, um, is it for you important that you share some same morals with those people?
influence.
For example, could you work with somebody who is an alternative facts, let's storm the Capitol forerunner?
Probably not. Um, Mostly just because. Well, I don't know. I guess. I guess it would depend on how loud about it they were. If they never said a word about it to me, then you know maybe. But honestly, it's just not something uh, that I adhere to at all. I don't agree with it, and I feel like those people would be less likely to want to work with me.
Probably,
Yeah.
probably.
So,
No, but I know what you mean with if they never spoke about it. Of course, if somebody is silent about his or her political ideas, of course, then you cannot know, and
yeah.
then
Well,
there is a.
for me, where the real line is, are you using music like is this about art to you and about uh, creating art, or is it about using it as a platform to spread propaganda or um, spread? Are you using it as a platform to indoctrinate people? In which case, I'm not interested in doing that.
May I ask where? Um, I mean, there is indoctrination from the left, and there is indoctrination from the right, and there is indoctrination from other sides as well. Um, but let's think about people like Propagandy, um, who are very, very outspoken about their politics. Uh, I mean, like, think of a record like Failed States, very, very clear where they are standing. Could you work with
Yeah.
those people? Or would you say, like, too much ideology there?
No, I mean, I think, generally speaking, we're probably on the same page. So I don't think it would bother me that much.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I've also never been a huge Gandhi fan either. So
Doesn't matter. I'm just throwing out bands that I'm sure you know. That's why. Like,
yeah, and I that's not a slight towards them. It was just, you know, again, never really my thing. But I'd have probably an easier time. What's the word I'm looking for? Just reconciling with that. But again, it's not necessarily like putting that out there is not necessarily what I have set out to do. So in some ways, even if I agree on a personal level, it might be a little bit disingenuous to those people, to the other people, to have me involved, if that makes sense. I don't know. I don't really know what I'm saying right now, to be honest.
It doesn't matter. I think we're all getting that. You say that you could rather work with a band like that. I also guess that you would agree with any band that would be spreading political ideologies is rather not your thing, which I think is very interesting because
you know, I think it varies. You know, like I've taken War on Women out on, well, not me personally, but two of my bands have taken War on Women out on tour, and you know, I agree with what they stand for, and I'm glad that they're saying it. You know, it's just, I guess the real question for me is, are you a good band? And are you making good music to get your point across? Or are you just sort of going through the motions so that you can yell about these things that you think everybody needs to agree with you on? And there's a very fine line there. There's a line, and I don't really know how to identify it, where, you know, there's people being passionate about the way they feel about things and about the world and the changes that they would like to see. And then there are people that are, you know, very adamant about, you are wrong, and you know what I mean? And to me,
the
that's
accusing side.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of like, that's not helping. You know, that's turning people away from it. And,
that's deepening the trenches, right?
Yeah.
I think War on Women is a very good band to use as an example, because I think there is no kind of ideology in War on Women.
I mean, other than being very pro-feminist.
Yeah, but even that is, to me, not an ideology, but it's just, I mean, come on, man, we're talking about women, and they are totally right when we think about this stupid misogynist society that some of us want to establish or want to live in. That is not ideology. That is just necessity. When I think about my 9-year-old daughter living in a world of misogynists, I'm sick.
I agree with you completely.
So that is, to me, not ideology. That's just something that should be human nature, to treat women with respect.
I agree with you completely. I think it's a statement about just this world in general and culture in general, that it's viewed as an extreme, maybe not extreme, but that it's a polarizing subject to have a band like War on Women opening for Converge, which I can't wrap my head around, but
yeah, true.
Whatever, you know, it ultimately, bottom line, I think it's really good for people to see women on stage yelling about what makes them angry, because, you know, if we've gotten plenty of the white male perspective in hardcore, so let's hear
Yes.
what other people have to say.
Yes. And also, we haven't had lots of bands like War and Women. I mean, we had Punch, and then in the 90s we had the Riot Girls, but I think there are not that, unfortunately, there are not that many all female bands out there. Yeah.
Well, War on Women's not all female.
Yeah, but there, no, let's say let's say bands with a very pro female point of view.
Yeah, I agree. In hardcore, especially, it seems like it's trending in the opposite direction lately, which I'm happy to see.
Yeah,
But
fortunately, right?
it's still overwhelmingly, white male,
Yeah, old like we are.
dusty old men.
I have a question about you know, we've already had that in a bit, but there are conservatives and there are right wing bands. You know, of course, there is a huge difference between that. And could you see your band, Converge or Doomriders or whichever band we want to talk about, take a band on tour, which is not preaching, which is not sharing any kind of ideology, but whose members are of a more conservative nature? Could you see them taking? Could you see yourself taking them on tour?
I mean, I'm sure we have. We've taken. I couldn't even name half of the bands we've taken on tour over the years. There's been so many, and
Although you loved them all, to make that sure.
no,
That's a very honest
not all
answer.
of them, but it doesn't matter. Now we have a lot more control over that, but yeah, I mean, there have been numerous people who I've disagreed with on lots of very fundamental things that I've been on the road with, and it's okay.
Do you enjoy that status that you are now more in control of who you tour with?
Yeah, I guess so. Makes it's nice to be able to I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, just sort of shape a tour now and say, this is what we want to go for on this one. Like, just
Does it make life on the road easier?
It does usually, when you have a bunch of people that you really enjoy spending time with, and you're able to bring them out on the road with you. It's great. But I also always enjoy meeting new people, and I try to champion new bands as much as possible and bring out bands I've never met before, just because I think they're doing something cool. So.
So you said that now you are more in control about the touring and stuff. I mean, we all know that moment when you worked with somebody and a few years later you notice that that person turned out to be on the wrong side of things. I mean, we cannot change that, but do you take lessons from it for your own touring business and all the other things?
I mean, I don't know if I can point to anyone directly in our history that would fit that description.
Good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure some eagle-eyed listener out there can go through the vast history of this band and find, no, you knew this guy, and I'd be like, oh yeah, he's a but
you mean those internet warriors, right? Keyboard warriors. Yeah.
I mean, whatever, people are going to do what they're going to do. It's not my business.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, I don't feel like we really have that. Yeah, we've always just kind of looked for kindred spirits, not necessarily on a musical level, sonically, but that just like to approach things the same way we do.
So can you name like 2 or 3 tours where you really liked to be on tour with that band or those bands?
I mean, there were bands that we took out multiple times that we loved. We
Which
loved,
already speaks volumes, right?
yeah, like Coliseum, we took out numerous times. Planes Mistaken for Stars, Rise and Fall.
Mm.
I mean, it wasn't us taking them out, but Neurosis, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
very much kindred spirits. I don't know. There's a ton. Like it's sort of like a weird extended family. And then when you sort of dig back into the history of it all a bit, especially back to that initial Boston, like mid to late '90s scene with like Hydra Head Records and Converge and Cave In and all of our little group of friends. I mean, it's all stayed very just intertwined. We're all still making music together and we're all still friends, and we always look for reasons to either tour in our projects together or tour with each other's bands. And just through that we've met so many other people that sort of operate the same way, and those are the people we choose to work with.
It's interesting that you mentioned those that little core of Boston bands, because I always had the feeling that even though there were sonical differences between all of them, but you had a feeling as if it was all held together by some kind of mutual love and respect, and however you want to call it, for each other. And that is something that I also still recognize in all of the new records that have been put out by those bands. I mean, like the Old Man Gloom album. I mean, like we're talking about a bunch of people who are living on opposite sides of the continent, right?
Yeah.
Um, Even though there are sometimes differences between the drummer on the internet and his singer, but I think that's also a trademark of Old Man Gloom.
Well, yeah, that's always been.
Has it always been that way? Yeah.
Oh yeah, completely. Old Man, the thing that people don't understand about Old Man Gloom, I guess looking at the members of the band and the other music we've made and the music that Old Man Gloom has made, Old Man Gloom is not in any way a serious band. Everything in that band, literally everything, has always been specifically just to make each other laugh. That's it. It's just to have fun. That doesn't mean that we don't try to make the best possible music that we can.
That is something different. That's true.
But even the stuff that seems very serious is very often a joke.
Well, I mean, like putting out a promo record and then all of a sudden hitting the fans with like something totally different. That is already a good joke.
Oh, thank you. That upset some people.
Well, but I think there we're back at with what you expect, right? And how you understand the band. With Old Man Gloom, I had never the feeling as if we're talking about a band that takes it. You do take the music you make serious, but not up to an extent where it becomes ideology, or where it becomes okay. We got to be serious about a topic. That's not Old Man Gloom.
No, I mean, if anything that Old Man Gloom does upsets you, you really need to go back and just look at the history of this band and see how obvious it is that at every step on this journey, whenever we've done anything, we very easily could have done the thing that probably would have helped our careers, but instead we did the thing that was the most likely thing to destroy our careers. So and we laughed about it, so that's all that matters.
Could that also be because most of you, or a basically all of you, already had like a career outside of Old Man Gloom?
Possibly a bit, but I think we always wanted to keep it as something that was fun instead of turning it into something that became a source of stress and frustration.
Let me guess, that is also something that you're trying to stay away from in all your other bands nowadays, right?
It is, but you know, in certain ways, you know, that's somewhat unavoidable. I mean, you know, Converge is definitely more of an institution, I guess. If you know, that would be my main band, and the one that, you know, is the most full time of everything. So we have to be mindful of that.
True, but even then, also with Converge, I never had the feeling as if you are trying to force anything. Because I mean,
no.
already look at the time between new records.
That's true. I mean, a lot of that is also just because of necessity. That's just how that worked out. Because you know, one member of the band maybe moved to another part of the country, or you know, we were just touring a ton. You know, it just we do it when we can do it, and I don't think any of us are interested in putting out a record that isn't, you know, up to our standards. 1 second. Sorry, 1 minute.
No problem. That is something that happens at home here at Veil of Sound also all the time, because we also have children in the house.
I don't know if she wants to go out, kiddo. All right, you can try. Sorry.
No problem. No problem. It's nice to see that all other people are also dealing with the other problems, with the same problems. Sorry.
Yeah, you know how it is, dad life.
Yeah.
Wants to go, kiddo, but you can go out and have fun, okay? All right.
Just come back before midnight.
Yeah.
That's what my dad always used to say. Come back before midnight, and tomorrow is a school day. So if you go to a concert, make sure you wake up.
That's fairly similar. I was never back.
Did you also ever have the bucket of water thrown at you at 7 in the morning because you didn't get up?
I did not have that.
I had that because he was. If there was one thing that he was strict about, then it was going to school. But on the other hand,
that's a good thing.
Yeah, on the other hand, it also made me enjoy concerts very, very early on. I mean, like one of the first ones was Suicidal, where we closed the circle again, with a certain opening band that you might have heard of called Rage Against the Machine.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
First time I saw Suicidal was opening for Queensryche.
That's an interesting combination.
Yeah, I didn't care about Queensryche. I just went to see Suicidal and I left.
Yeah, with us, it was the other way around. We didn't know who the opening band was, and well, after like 2 songs, nobody thought about Suicidal anymore.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I've been to plenty of shows like that too, but yeah, that one in particular, I was like, I'm going to see Suicidal Tendencies, and it was maybe, I think it was right when Lights Camera Revolution came out, so it was pretty cool. I wasn't into that record, but you know, I still was psyched to see them.
A few last questions, and those are always our like quick fire questions where you just simply can spit out your answer and maybe give a short explanation. Suicidal Tendencies or Dead Kennedys?
Or what?
Yeah, you just have to choose.
Oh, I have to choose?
Yeah.
I can't.
No.
I need to know the parameters of the choice here.
Okay, listening at home. Would you
Depends
rather
on
put on a suicidal record or a Dead Kennedys record?
it really depends on my mood. Um, yeah, I that's a 50-50. Just depends on my mood kind of thing.
Okay. I mean, like you're living in Massachusetts, so I got to ask one sports question.
Okay.
Baseball or football?
I guess football.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not really a sports fan. But if I'm gonna watch something, I think football is there's more action.
True. True.
Yeah.
Baseball is the best thing to make my wife fall asleep. So it's fine.
Yeah. Baseball, like, I understand you hit the ball and you run around the bases, and I understand the rules, but like the strategy in baseball, it just goes over my head. I don't get it.
Yeah, the rules are definitely more complicated than in football. Definitely.
Yeah, like football, there's people running into each other and running around, and it can be fun to watch. Although I don't really care.
Holiday choice: mountain life or sea life? Like where you go to the mountains or rather to the sea?
I'm a beach guy all the way.
Mm-hmm.
I've never lived farther than 10 minutes from the beach in my life.
You still do? I envy you. I envy you.
Have to be near the beach.
So is it also something that you visit regularly?
Yeah.
Also, I mean, like you've been speaking about snowstorm coming, even in times and days like that.
Not every day.
I mean, not in the middle of a snowstorm, but like
not in the middle of a snowstorm, no. But yeah, during the winter, okay. I like to take the dog there and let her run around and stuff.
Okay. Dogs or cats? That wasn't on my list, but still I have to ask.
Oh, definitely. Dogs? I'm allergic to cats. So.
Well, that makes the choice easy, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Guitar or bass?
That's again the mood. It's all about the mood. I guess if I'm writing music, guitar, but otherwise it depends on who's in the room and who's doing what. If someone's already got a guitar, or two people already have a guitar, I'll pick up a bass. Whatever. I don't care. It's all fun.
Would you describe yourself as a pragmatic person in that way?
Yeah, I guess.
Interesting.
To me, it's never been about guitar or bass. It's just been about making good songs. Mm-hmm. So, to me, like, you have people that want to master the instrument. Mm-hmm. I just want it. To me, it's just a tool to make a song that I like.
It's interesting. I also never had the impression with any of your bands as if there were people in there who wanted to impress the audience. That's none of the bands really seems to want to do that.
But we can't.
Now you're being too humble. I guess that there are a lot of people in a lot of bands you play in and yourself that could impress people. Very sure.
They might be able to.
Nah, don't. In German we would say, don't put yourself in the line or in the shadows. You are good at what you do.
Well, thank you but I can.
I mean, you're not Pastorius.
To put it into perspective. Hmm? Someone who plays drums, watching Ben play drums, versus someone who plays bass, watching me play bass. The drummer is going to be like, "Holy shit, that dude is good." The bassist will be like, "Yeah, he plays bass in that song. Pretty good." It works. It works in the song, is what they would say.
Okay. Virgin margarita or a regular margarita?
I guess that depends on if I want to throw up.
Okay.
I'm not a big drinker. Okay. I'll have a taste every now and then.
Yeah. Or would the question be better with wine and beer? Would that be better?
I don't like either.
Oh, interesting.
Uh,
So
um, I I will. I like a margarita, but honestly, probably couldn't finish a whole one. That's how much of a lightweight I am.
well, I'm even lighter than you, being straight edge for life.
Oh, there you go. I was
Yeah,
straight.
that was
I was
not.
straight edge, and then now,
With me,
you
it
know,
was never a decision. It was just it was that way. I never came to a point where I had to decide.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, I didn't either. It was never like a I'm going to be straight edge now thing. It was just like I don't drink. Okay. Oh, that
y-
works. That's yeah. And then as I've gotten older, I realized that for me at least, the sort of super adamant adherence to this strict guideline
mm,
that was really honestly kind of arbitrary in my life.
mm-hmm.
It just stopped mattering to me. And
Yeah, I think I
I
think
still
I know what
don't,
you're saying.
I barely drink, literally like maybe once or twice a year, I'll have about that much alcohol, because I don't really like it. Um, yeah. And like to me, looking back now, I realize that straight edge was not about adhering to any sort of lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
or any set of rules. It was just about making choices to live my life in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I'm an adult, it's a lot easier for me because I was straight edge for so long to just live that way without, needing needing to adhere to a rule. It's like, yeah, okay, I can, sure, I will have a sip of that. My wife drinks every now and then. She'll get a
Same
margarita.
here. Yeah, same here.
I'll be like, I want that. That's all pink and has sugar in it. Let me try that. Or
Yeah.
just stuff like that. Or now I work in the cannabis industry and like uh, it's I've learned a lot about that and I've seen how positive that can be for people dealing with chronic pain and things of that nature. And so my whole, attitude about that has changed. And, I just, yeah,
But I also don't know how it was with you. I mean, like we come from a scene where, or from a generation, where smoking weed and stuff was normal.
yeah,
Being the opposite was unnormal, even though it was not bad, but unnormal.
yeah.
Um, but I also never considered anybody who smoked weed uh, a drug head. Like, but that has
Yeah.
never occurred to me. And
I
probably
have,
not the same with you.
yeah. I mean, I came up in hardcore and punk in the late 80s and early 90s. And, that scene was kind of overrun with people that were just drug casualties.
Yeah.
And, so I didn't want to be like that. And that was more what drove me rather than the normal sort of youth culture at the time where people were drinking or smoking weed or whatever. Like I wasn't interested in their world anyways, and they weren't interested in mine. I was interested in skateboarding and punk rock, and in that world I saw people who were older than me that were completely fucking just burned out, and I was like, I
Mm.
don't want to be like that.
Yeah.
But fast forward, a, whatever number of years, like to the mid and late 90s, where straight edge took a turn towards the conservative. And um, it became very much like, this is what you do. And if you don't do this, then you're
Yeah.
wrong. And I was just like, I want nothing to do with this either. And so that was really what started turning me away from it. Straight edge is what turned me away from straight edge, if that makes
Which
sense.
is very, very interesting. I think, if once again, if I ever had been a conscious decider on the question, it would also have turned me away because, um, to me, it's more of an attitude. and not an ideology. But as you said, there were moments when it became like militant. I still remember Karl Buchner from Earth Crisis jumping off stage into the crowd because a friend of mine had completely forgotten where he was and had lit a cigarette.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It just turned.
Militancy is never a good pick.
I agree.
I have two more.
Sure.
One which is hopefully easy and one which is probably easy.
Okay.
Roadburn.
Just quick. I want your readers to forgive me, but I've got snot coming out of my nose and I got to wipe it off.
Nah, no problem. I mean, like, they've seen me drink so much water today because also being sick, so all good.
All right, cool. Well, I'm gross. Sorry.
Some people would say the same thing about me drinking water too. So, Roadburn or Hellfest?
Roadburn. I love Hellfest. Love Hellfest. But Roadburn is a whole different experience.
I still remember seeing you in 2018.
I mean, Hellfest, some of the best live sets I've ever played have been at Hellfest.
Okay.
And at Roadburn, to be honest. But Hellfest, it's just a big classic festival situation where, it's just a very different thing. Like Roadburn, it's the town of Tilburg.
Yeah.
And people are just hanging out, going to restaurants, and there's the hotel right across the street, and you're just going over there and back and forth, and I'm gonna go catch this band over here now. And
right.
It's more mellow, I guess.
Definitely.
And generally speaking, Roadburn sort of speaks to my musical tastes a bit more than Hellfest does. Although Hellfest has surprised me numerous times where, there was this whole main stage of headliners that are things that I was like, I don't care about that. I'm not going to watch that. And then the next thing you know, I'm standing singing along to every Def Leppard song. Like, it's fun. I didn't realize how many Def Leppard songs I knew until I watched them at Hellfest, and I was like, "Holy shit, they had a lot of hits."
Yeah, definitely. That is definitely for sure.
Yeah, so I love Hellfest, but Roadburn has my heart.
I think it's also the fact that, just like you said, for one, I mean, let's be honest, we're 40-year-olds, right? So sleeping in a comfy bed is much nicer than in a tent.
Oh, absolutely. And, going to a real restaurant instead of getting some greasy, fries from a trailer,
Yeah, that's true. And now the easy question. I think that is an easy question. Discharge or Rorschach?
That's a confusing question. Because
just like what you would put on right now.
Right now?
Right now. After the interview is done, after you can say like, oh, that guy was such a mess.
Yeah, I guess Rorschach. I think because in the case of Rorschach, I was there for it. Mm-hmm. It's a little more interwoven into my life. Mm-hmm. Whereas Discharge, I love Discharge. But
it was a little earlier, right?
Yeah, Discharge sort of existed in the as a mythical thing to me for a long time.
That's true.
So yeah, I guess Rorschach. Although Rorschach likely wouldn't exist if Discharge didn't exist.
That is also true. So that is the end of our interview. So thank you everybody for listening. Thanks Nate for being here. And of course everybody who has now watched the first 3 episodes, we will have another one with Ben coming up next month. So we're looking forward to completing our set of Converge topics or Converge people. Nate, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was fun. It's been a good one.
Thank you.